They know the David who go on stage, who has his ways about him, but you know, they really want to know what's inside. The geniuses, the brilliant ones, the people. I'm referring to myself.
Legendary filmmaker Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle Singer, lived through a nightmare no one could ever imagine, right inside their own home. The one place meant to feel safe suddenly became the setting for something dark and unforgettable. And the shocking part? It all involved someone they knew, someone they loved, someone they trusted. For decades, Rob built his legacy on stories about love, family, and human connection. But in one tragic twist, his own real-life story turned into heartbreak. His son, Nick Reiner, had already been through a long and very public struggle with personal challenges, leaving the family constantly worried. Yet no one could have predicted just how tense things would get, especially the night before everything completely fell apart. Now investigators are circling back, digging into old interviews and statements Nick once made about his father. Remarks that in hindsight sound like red flags that went unseen for too long. The heartbreaking incident that tore through Rob and Michelle's world happened on December 13th, 2025, a night that was supposed to be filled with laughter and holiday cheer. That evening, the couple attended a Christmas party hosted by Conan O'Brien, a star-studded upbeat event packed with friends, colleagues, and familiar faces ready to celebrate the holidays. But beneath the twinkling lights and festive music, something just didn't sit right. According to multiple witnesses, an argument suddenly broke out between Rob and Nick, and it quickly stopped the entire party in its tracks. This wasn't just a quiet disagreement, it was intense. Voices clashed, emotions flared, and the tension was so thick, people couldn't look away. Guests exchanged uneasy glances as the shouting echoed through the room. Several attendees later told investigators that Nick's behavior seemed off that night, unsettling, unpredictable, and impossible to ignore. One guest even said, "Nick had everyone completely on edge." That phrase started spreading fast once authorities began piecing together what truly happened before the night took such a dark turn. Despite the chaos, Rob didn't back down. He tried to take control, stepping up to calm things down before it went too far. Michelle stayed by his side the whole time, holding her ground and refusing to let the situation explode. The two of them were steady, almost united in silent understanding, trying to keep things from falling apart right there in front of everyone. When Rob and Michelle finally decided to leave, it didn't look dramatic or like they were storming off. It was calm, deliberate, like they were trying to get Nick out of the spotlight and deal with things privately. To the people watching, it looked like two parents doing everything they could to protect their family, desperate to take back control of a moment that was slipping away way too fast. Later that same night, Rob got on a call with Eric Idle, and surprisingly, his tone seemed totally different. The two talked about creative plans for the long-awaited Spinal Tap 2 project. The conversation was upbeat, focused on the future, with no sign that Rob was upset or anxious. Eric told investigators that Rob sounded motivated, inspired, and ready to dive into work again. Nothing about that call hinted at any personal turmoil brewing behind the scenes, but behind the smiles and calm phone calls, there was a darker truth. One Rob had quietly shared with a few close friends in the weeks before that night. He admitted something chilling. He was afraid of his own son. That's not something Rob said lightly. It wasn't anger speaking, it was real fear. The kind that comes from a parent watching someone they love lose control and not knowing how to stop it. That quiet fear, those hushed confessions, would soon take on an entirely new weight once the Reiners stepped back into their home that night. A night that would change everything. In the early hours of December 14th, something unthinkable unfolded inside the Reiners' quiet Brentwood home, a tragedy that left everyone stunned. According to the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office, the heartbreaking event happened sometime before sunrise, though investigators couldn't pinpoint the exact moment it all went down. By 3 p.m., the timeline took a chilling turn. Romy Reiner, Rob and Michelle's daughter who lived right across the street, started to worry when she couldn't reach her parents. She walked over, expecting a simple visit. But the second she stepped through that door, she knew something was terribly wrong. Within moments, she called for help, her voice shaking. Paramedics and LAPD officers rushed to the scene, sirens cutting through the still Brentwood air. But it was too late. Both Rob and Michelle were found unresponsive. Authorities quickly sealed off the home, launching a full-scale investigation that they immediately classified as a serious domestic case. Detectives combed through every inch of the house, and what they found stopped them cold. No signs of forced entry anywhere. The doors were locked, windows untouched, everything perfectly intact. It didn't look like anyone had broken in, which meant whoever was responsible either already knew the code or had been let in willingly. That single detail flipped the case upside down. Neighbors were questioned one by one, but nobody heard a thing that night. No shouting, no crashes, no alarms, nothing. The silence itself became part of the mystery. In a neighborhood like Brentwood, where every sound echoes and security systems pick up even the smallest noise, that total silence was chilling. People started whispering. What really happened behind those quiet walls? Detectives soon realized that whoever moved through the Reiner home that night knew it like the back of their hand. Every step seemed intentional, every action quiet and precise. There were no signs of panic or struggle, just eerie stillness, the kind that comes from someone deeply familiar with the space. As investigators pieced the timeline together, one name started coming up again and again: Nick Reiner. According to police records, Nick left the house sometime after the tragedy, roughly 4 a.m. Not long after, he showed up at the Pierside Hotel in Santa Monica. Hotel staff later told officers that Nick didn't seem the least bit off. He checked in smoothly, calm and polite, like a man on a normal business trip. No shaky hands, no strange behavior, no sign of panic whatsoever. But what investigators found later told a completely different story. When they searched the hotel room after he checked out, they discovered evidence directly linking him to what had happened in Brentwood. That single find turned the quiet hotel stay into a crucial part of the case, a piece that connected Nick straight to the devastating event inside his parents' home. Still, Nick didn't stick around for long. His stay was short, just a few hours. Then he vanished again, moving fast, like someone who didn't want to be tracked. Later that same day, surveillance cameras at a gas station near Exposition Boulevard and Vermont Avenue caught him on video. He strolled in casually, grabbed a drink, paid, and walked right back out. Calm, composed, like nothing had happened at all. That calmness sent chills through investigators when they saw the footage. By the time the evening of December 14th rolled around, detectives had already zeroed in on Nick's movements. Around 9:15 p.m., they knew exactly where he was, and that calm exterior was about to collide with the weight of everything that had happened just hours before. Near Exposition Park, just steps from the USC campus, flashing red and blue lights filled the night sky as several patrol cars surrounded an intersection in a tense but carefully planned operation. Bystanders stopped in shock as officers moved in, their commands echoing through the quiet streets. But to everyone's surprise, Nick Reiner didn't fight, didn't run, he just stood still. Calm, silent, and almost detached, he followed every instruction without a word. Within minutes, it was over. Nick was taken into custody without a single sign of resistance. As the night went on, detectives began stitching the story together. A heated argument, an eerily silent home, no forced entry, a vanishing act, and a strange trail stretching across Los Angeles. But even with all those clues, one question kept haunting everyone. What really happened inside that Brentwood house? That's when the investigation took a darker, more complicated turn. Once the Reiner residence was locked down, the forensic team stepped in to uncover the truth behind those closed doors. They combed through every inch of the house, collecting samples, analyzing evidence, and mapping out every possible timeline. The goal? To fill in the blanks that witnesses couldn't explain. With no cameras inside the home and no clear timestamps to guide them, the medical examiner had to depend entirely on scientific evidence. Every temperature shift, every trace, every mark left behind mattered. The question was chilling but simple. When did Rob and Michelle Reiner lose their lives? And how did it happen? Forensic experts focused on two key clues: rigor mortis and lividity. Rigor mortis happens when a body's muscles stiffen after death, while lividity shows how the blood settles once the heart stops. These subtle physical signs can reveal when someone passed, a timeline written in biology. After detailed analysis, the medical examiner concluded that both Rob and Michelle had likely passed in the early morning hours, nearly 12 hours before they were discovered. That finding lined up perfectly with what detectives had already suspected. The tragedy struck deep in the night, when the whole neighborhood was asleep, unaware of the horror just a few doors away. Next came the toughest part: examining the physical evidence. Forensic specialists described the injuries as multiple sharp force injuries, a clinical phrase that meant only one thing: the wounds came from a sharp-edged object, likely a knife or something similar. And these weren't distant strikes. They were close-range blows, delivered face-to-face, showing that the attacker was right there within reach. This wasn't some impulsive act from afar. It was personal, direct, and deliberate. What left investigators shaken wasn't just the weapon or the nature of the wounds, but the repetition. The evidence showed that it didn't end quickly. It went on longer than anyone could have imagined. Even the most seasoned forensic experts were stunned by the intensity shown in the pattern. Each detail painted a disturbing picture of what really happened inside that quiet Brentwood home. This wasn't a single strike followed by retreat. It lasted for a stretch of time, brief but powerful, with movement and force that told a story of deliberate continuation. From a forensic standpoint, that kind of repetition signals something specific. Sustained action, not just a sudden burst of emotion. Investigators don't jump to emotional conclusions. They follow the evidence wherever it leads. And in this case, the findings pointed toward one chilling legal reality. The attacker didn't stop when they could have. They chose to keep going. After the forensic team delivered their shocking conclusions, Nick Reiner was officially hit with 2 counts of first-degree homicide, one for each of his parents. In California, first degree is the highest, most serious charge there is, the kind reserved for acts prosecutors believe were intentional and possibly planned ahead of time. But that wasn't all. Prosecutors went even further. They added special circumstances to the charges because this tragedy involved more than one victim. Under California law, that label instantly escalates the case to the highest legal tier possible. And it's not just for show. That classification completely transforms how the trial unfolds. With those special circumstances in place, the potential punishment becomes as severe as the system allows. If found guilty, Nick Reiner could face life in prison without parole, or even capital punishment, depending on how the court decides to proceed. According to the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office, these were the most serious charges they could possibly bring under state law. Their public statement carried a tone of absolute certainty. They were confident in the forensic evidence and firmly believed it met every requirement for such devastating accusations. The story had officially shifted, no longer just a tragedy, but now one of the most intense courtroom battles Los Angeles had seen in years. Detectives had finally pieced together a clear timeline, a full sequence of events backed by forensic science, confirmed cause, physical evidence of close contact, and no signs of forced entry. Every clue pointed toward one chilling conclusion. When investigators matched that with Nick's movement patterns afterward, the puzzle was complete. The entire case was ready to enter the courtroom, where every detail would soon be laid bare before the world. That moment came on the morning of December 17, 2025. For the very first time, Nick Reiner stood before a judge, and the entire atmosphere in that courtroom was electric. The strict setting, the silence, the sharp sound of the judge's gavel, everything about it sent a jolt through those watching. This wasn't some routine hearing, it was a turning point. The official start of a courtroom saga that had already gripped the city in disbelief and heartbreak. Until that morning, everything about the case had existed only in police reports, charging documents, and short press statements. But now, the story was stepping into the legal spotlight. From that point on, every word, every gesture, every motion made inside that courtroom would become part of the official record. Security was beyond tight. The judge had banned all broadcast coverage. No cameras, no live feeds, no TV crews. Only a select few, court staff, attorneys, and a handful of reporters, were allowed inside to witness the moment firsthand. Those restrictions had been planned well before Nick even entered the building, and they stayed locked in place for the entire hearing. When the doors finally opened and Nick Reiner walked in, the room went completely still. He was flanked on both sides by sheriff's deputies who guided him straight to the defense table. The only sound was the faint shuffle of their steps. Every glance, every motion in that room carried heavy meaning. It felt like the air itself was waiting for something to happen. And then people noticed what he was wearing. A harm prevention smock, the kind issued to individuals under special observation during high-risk custody situations. It wasn't a regular outfit. It was thick, sleeveless, designed for protection rather than comfort, and it stood out immediately. Everyone in the courtroom saw it, but no one said a word about it. The silence surrounding it made it even more striking. That moment wasn't just the start of a trial. It was the point where the quiet mystery of Brentwood officially became a full-blown courtroom drama. The calm, eerie silence that had once filled the Reiner home now hung over a Los Angeles courtroom, marking the beginning of a legal battle that would keep the entire nation watching every move. The judge didn't say a word about Nick Reiner's unusual outfit. The attorneys didn't mention it either. It was like the harm prevention smock didn't even exist, but the silence around it spoke volumes. Once the session officially began, the courtroom grew dead quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy, almost suffocating. Then the charges echoed through the room, read out in cold, mechanical legal language. 2 counts of first-degree homicide. 1 for his father, 1 for his mother. No emotion, no extra words. Just the law cutting through the air like a knife. When the judge asked if he understood his rights, Nick's reply was short, calm, and steady. Yes, that one-word confirmation was the only thing he said during the entire hearing. He didn't enter a plea. He didn't ask questions. He didn't even flinch as the weight of those charges filled the courtroom. He just sat there, still focused, eyes straight ahead, like his thoughts were locked somewhere deep inside. No visible emotion, no outburst, just complete control. The stillness almost made the moment more chilling. After the charges were read, the hearing shifted gears to scheduling. Nick's defense attorney requested more time before entering a formal plea, a strategic delay that could buy weeks of preparation. The judge agreed instantly, setting the next court date for January 7, 2026. The prosecution didn't object. Everything moved with eerie smoothness. No arguments, no dramatic interruptions, just quiet precision. By the end of that morning, it was clear. The legal war had barely started, but the tension in that room said everything. Reporters could feel it. Everyone present knew this case wasn't going to fade quietly. And then came the revelation that left the room buzzing. The man standing beside Nick wasn't just any lawyer, it was Alan Jackson. The name alone carried serious weight. Alan Jackson isn't your everyday attorney. He's a courtroom heavyweight, a legal strategist known for stepping into the stormiest, most high-profile cases out there. Over the years, he stood beside names that have made national headlines: Kevin Spacey, Harvey Weinstein, and Karen Reed. And now, he was defending Nick Reiner. His presence in that courtroom changed everything. This wasn't a temporary setup or some quick legal patch-up. This was a power move. The choice of Alan Jackson screamed preparation, precision, and serious money. It signaled that Nick's defense team was ready for a long, brutal, drawn-out battle, one that would test every limit of the legal system. Insiders whispered that this kind of defense wasn't just about survival, it was about strategy. Jackson's involvement meant deep forensic reviews, endless filings, and expert testimony stacked against the state's case. It meant Nick's team was gearing up to fight every single detail, no matter how small. The courtroom was silent, but the message was loud and clear. This was going to be a war of endurance. When the hearing wrapped up, Nick was escorted out just as quietly as he came in. Flanked by guards, no eye contact, no words for the press. The prosecutors stayed silent. The defense gave no statements. Reporters whispered furiously, trying to piece together what had just unfolded before their eyes. Within minutes, the courtroom emptied out, the quiet returning as if nothing had happened. But outside those walls, the noise was just beginning. By the afternoon, the question on everyone's mind wasn't about guilt or innocence. It was about money. Who was footing the bill for this kind of powerhouse defense? Legal insiders knew one thing: a double first-degree homicide case with special circumstances doesn't come cheap. Cases like this demand top-tier forensic experts, private investigators, psychological analysts, and stacks of motions that can drag on for years. The financial burn rate is wild. Millions can vanish before a single witness even takes the stand. Speculation spread fast. Whispers of hidden funds, possible family assets, and outside help became the newest twist in a saga that already felt straight out of a Hollywood thriller. Some experts estimated that mounting a defense of this scale could easily top $1 million before the trial even begins. As the day ended, one thing was clear. The courtroom may have gone silent, but the storm around Nick Reiner was only getting louder. There was one huge problem. Nick Reiner didn't have any clear source of income. No job, no active career, nothing that could explain how such a massive legal defense was being funded. That mystery instantly set off a firestorm of speculation across the media, with everyone asking the same burning question: who's paying for this? Insiders began whispering that the Reiner family estate might be footing the bill for Nick's defense, a claim that sent shockwaves through both Hollywood and legal circles. Others questioned whether that would even be legal. Estate law experts quickly jumped in, explaining that this kind of situation lives in a legal gray zone. In some cases, shared or inherited assets can be used to cover legal costs, especially if the estate hasn't been settled yet. But in others, doing so could spark serious disputes or even lead to court challenges from other family members. Inside the actual courtroom, though, none of these questions were touched. The judge didn't ask about the money, and Nick's defense team stayed completely silent about it. But outside those walls, the debate caught fire. The public was split down the middle. Some argued that everyone deserves strong legal representation no matter the crime, while others found the idea deeply unsettling. The thought that family-linked funds might be used to defend the accused felt hard to stomach for many. As the legal proceedings stayed calm and procedural inside, emotions outside were running hotter than ever. Even within the Reiner family, things reportedly felt fractured. Sources close to the situation claimed that not all relatives wanted pure punishment. Some hoped Nick would get mental health treatment along with the criminal process. It was no longer just a legal issue. It had become a fight over morality, family, and what justice really means. Still, none of these reports were officially confirmed. No signed court filings, no verified public statements, nothing solid. Everything outside remained speculation. But one thing stayed firm: the prosecution's stance. From their perspective, nothing had changed. Prosecutors maintained total confidence in their case. They said the evidence clearly showed that the crime met the full definition of first-degree homicide, emphasizing both the violence of the act and Nick's movements afterward. In their eyes, everything pointed to deliberation and intent, the kind of proof that holds up under California's toughest laws. And because this case carried special circumstances, meaning more than one victim, the sentencing options were already locked in place. If convicted, Nick Reiner faced only two possible outcomes: life in prison without parole, or the death penalty. No middle ground, no lighter sentence, just the harshest punishments the state allows. Meanwhile, as the courtroom lights dimmed and the lawyers packed up, the investigation outside kept grinding forward. Detectives continued digging for new details. Attorneys were building airtight strategies. And behind closed doors, pieces of sensitive information were circulating quietly among those close to the case. Evidence, statements, and personal accounts that hadn't yet reached the public. Everyone involved could feel it. The next phase was going to be even more intense. Inside the courthouse, things might have looked calm, but beneath that surface, the pressure was building fast. Reporters, insiders, and even legal experts knew something was about to shift. And they were right, because Nick Reiner himself was about to break his silence. In the days that followed, all eyes turned toward a statement he had made once before. But this time, it hit completely differently. The tone, the timing, the impact, everything about it sent a ripple through the narrative. His words didn't just add to the story, they flipped it on its head. That moment led to what the media quickly began calling Nick Reiner's shocking revelation. In old interviews that started resurfacing, Nick had once opened up about his early years, and what he said painted a picture of deep emotional distance between him and his father, Rob Reiner. Nick admitted that he never really felt close to his dad, no matter how hard he tried. He said that disconnection shaped the way he saw himself within the family, leaving him feeling like he didn't quite belong. He described growing up watching his family share laughs, bond over traditions, and connect in ways that made him feel invisible, like he was standing just outside the circle, unsure how to step in. That sense of being an outsider, Nick once said, followed me everywhere. From the outside, the Reiner family seemed perfect, stable, successful, and full of love. Rob Reiner, by all accounts, was a devoted father, deeply involved with his kids, often seen supporting their interests and celebrating their successes. He bonded with his other children through sports, creative projects, and shared passions that created strong memories. But for Nick, those same moments felt like barriers instead of bridges. Even though Rob tried his best, Nick felt emotionally disconnected, not ignored, but unseen. Rob's success and constant work schedule didn't mean he didn't care, but sometimes love gets lost in the spaces between time and attention. Nick later said that while he was surrounded by love, he didn't always feel it in a way that reached him. Over time, that invisible gap grew into something heavier, a quiet kind of loneliness that followed him everywhere he went. As that isolation deepened, Nick started drifting away from the comfort of home. He looked for belonging somewhere else, in people and places that promised freedom instead of rules, escape instead of understanding. That's when his substance use began. What started as innocent experimentation quickly turned into a dangerous habit, a dependency that took over fast. By just 15 years old, Nick's struggles had become impossible to hide. He entered rehabilitation, marking the beginning of a long, painful fight that would last years. His family didn't cover it up or act like it wasn't happening. They went public seeking help again and again. It wasn't some secret shame, it was a desperate effort to save him from something already pulling him under. Nick later confessed that the substances he relied on were powerful, destructive, and left him fighting a battle that he couldn't easily win. Nick's struggle with addiction followed a heartbreaking and familiar rhythm, moments of progress that gave his parents hope, followed by crushing relapses that broke it all apart. Each time things started to look better, the crash that followed hit even harder. During those darker periods, Nick's life spiraled into chaos. He moved constantly. Maine, New Jersey, Texas, drifting from place to place without structure, stability, or direction. These weren't moves for opportunity. They were attempts to survive, to find some sense of control in a life that kept slipping away. But through every low point, through every failed rehab, Rob and Michelle Reiner never gave up on him. They stayed by his side no matter how bad things got. They showed up to every call, every treatment center, every plea for help. They didn't hide their pain. In interviews over the years, they spoke openly about Nick's addiction, never blaming others or running from the truth. Rob and Michelle poured their hearts, their energy, and their money into helping Nick heal. They funded multiple rehabilitation programs, paid for long-term treatment, and offered emotional support again and again. Phone calls, visits, patience, they gave him everything they could. Even when the relapses hurt them deeply, they never stopped trying to bring their son back from the edge. It was the kind of love that doesn't quit no matter how hard the road gets. A love that fought until the very end. Friends close to the Reiner family later revealed something heartbreaking. Their efforts to help Nick never stopped, not even when it looked like hope had completely run out. Rob Reiner, always searching for a way to reach his son, decided to try something totally new. Instead of keeping work and family separate, he pulled Nick straight into his own world of filmmaking. In 2015, father and son teamed up to create the movie Being Charlie, a raw, emotional story inspired directly by Nick's real-life battle with addiction and recovery. It wasn't some polished Hollywood version of healing, it was brutally honest. The film showed the messy truth, relapse, resistance, and the never-ending fight to stay clean. For a short while during that project, things actually seemed to shift. Nick was showing up, staying focused, and working side by side with his father, something that hadn't happened in years. Those who were close to the Reiners said you could see the difference in him. He was grounded, steady, and for once, he looked like he had a sense of direction. It gave the family a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, Nick was finally turning a corner. For that brief window, he had something he'd been missing for so long: structure, a routine, a purpose. Working beside his dad gave him discipline and creative expression all at once, and it looked like it might save him. The chaos that had always surrounded him seemed to fade for a bit. There was calm, there was focus, there was light peeking through all that darkness, but sadly, that peace didn't last. Not long after, Nick relapsed again, and everything he'd built began to crumble. The same destructive cycle came roaring back: instability, distance, and emotional chaos. Each relapse hit harder than the one before, draining not just Nick, but everyone around him. His parents, who had already been through years of heartbreak, were now running out of emotional strength. In the years leading up to the tragic night, the family's fear kept growing. The cycles were speeding up, and each one felt more dangerous than the last. What used to feel manageable with rehab, time, and patience was turning into something unpredictable, something volatile. Still, Rob and Michelle never walked away. They stood by Nick's side through every fall, every setback, every painful restart. They offered love, guidance, and support. But love doesn't erase fear. And according to those close to the family, that fear had become very real. They weren't just worried about Nick's recovery anymore. They were quietly worried for their own safety too. That long-standing emotional distance between father and son, the one Nick had once admitted never truly healed, started to carry heavier meaning. It wasn't an excuse for anything, but it revealed the depth of their bond and its fractures. Love mixed with guilt, hope tangled with disappointment, and years of effort that never quite connected the way they wanted. By the time that Christmas party rolled around, the tension wasn't new. It had been building for years. That explosive argument between Rob and Nick wasn't just some random fight that came out of nowhere. It was the breaking point, the culmination of a family that had been pushing, pulling, and holding on through years of addiction, relapse, and heartbreak. Every decision, every argument, every boundary they tried to set, it was all part of that same painful cycle that had shaped the Reiner family's lives long before that night. As the years passed, the emotional distance that Nick first described from his childhood never disappeared. It followed him into adulthood, woven tightly with his instability and repeated struggles to get clean. It shaped how he saw himself, how he connected with others, and how he carried his pain. And when the unimaginable finally happened, that distance was still there, silent, unresolved, and heavy. In the days following the devastating loss of Rob Reiner and Michelle Reiner, the remaining family members finally broke their silence, and what they said would leave everyone listening heartbroken. The first public statement from the shattered Reiner family came through the voices of Romy Reiner and Jake Reiner, the couple's surviving children, and their message stopped everyone cold. It wasn't about the case. It wasn't about evidence or legal battles. It was about grief, love, and loss. Their words were raw and stripped of anything formal. They described the loss of their parents as a shock beyond words, something too painful to fully express. The statement didn't talk about Rob and Michelle as Hollywood figures. It spoke of them as parents, as the heartbeat of their family, the emotional glue that held everything together. It was intimate, deeply personal, and heartbreakingly human. For a moment, the world was reminded that behind the flashing headlines and courtroom updates, this wasn't just a national story. It was a private tragedy, one that tore apart a family's foundation forever. In their message, Romy and Jake also took time to thank the flood of people who had reached out. Support came pouring in from around the world. Friends, colleagues, and complete strangers alike sending memories, condolences, and love. Messages flooded social media, handwritten letters, even flowers arriving from across the country. But even in the middle of that wave of compassion, the Reiners made one simple, powerful request: privacy. They needed space. Space to breathe, to grieve, to try to understand how life could ever move forward. They didn't want the chaos of speculation or the constant media noise. They wanted silence, peace, and room to mourn the two people who meant everything to them. Since that statement, the family has stayed completely silent. No interviews, no TV appearances, no social media updates. They stepped back deliberately, not to hide, but to heal. They chose quiet over headlines and grief over performance. Away from cameras, they began facing the unthinkable, the task of living without Rob and Michelle. In the weeks that followed, a private memorial was held for Rob and Michelle Reiner, a small, deeply emotional gathering meant only for those who had truly known and loved them. It wasn't a Hollywood event, it was a farewell. The service took place quietly, away from the press and bright lights. No photographers, no live streams, no public statements, just the people who had shared their lives, close family, lifelong friends, and a few trusted colleagues who had walked alongside Rob through his legendary career. Attendees later described the memorial as gentle, raw, and filled with love. It wasn't about fame or film credits. It was about connection, memory, and the deep bond between two people who had built their world around each other. Every word spoken focused on love, not loss, on laughter shared, not careers defined by awards. The atmosphere, as one attendee described, was quiet, respectful, and full of warmth. They honored Rob and Michelle not as public icons, but as humans, as partners, parents, and friends who had left behind not just a legacy, but a lifetime of impact. Meanwhile, across Hollywood, the outpouring of grief was impossible to ignore. Tributes poured in from every corner of the industry. Actors, directors, and writers who had worked with Rob Reiner over the decades took to social media to share memories, gratitude, and stories of his influence. Kathy Bates, who worked with Rob early in her career, spoke with emotion about his encouragement and trust on set, calling him a director who saw people, not just performances. Kate Hudson praised his impact across generations, saying he had shaped how so many understood the art of storytelling. And actor Nick Robinson, who worked with Rob later in his career, remembered him as a mentor and a light, someone who gave advice that stayed with him long after filming ended. Hollywood may have lost a legend, but for those closest to him, especially his children, the loss wasn't about cinema or legacy. It was about saying goodbye to mom and dad, the two hearts that held their family together, and the home that would never feel whole again. Every tribute shared after the tragedy carried its own unique tone, but they all echoed the same heartfelt message. Rob Reiner was generous, grounded, and kind. People remembered him as someone who always offered encouragement, shared wisdom, and made others feel seen. Whether on set or off, he had a calm, guiding presence that made everyone feel safe to create, explore, and give their best. Actors, writers, and producers alike spoke about Rob's rare ability to move effortlessly between comedy, drama, and romance without ever losing his heart or purpose. His legacy wasn't just about the films he made, it was about the people he inspired and the lives he touched along the way. As the entertainment world reflected, one truth became crystal clear. Rob Reiner's mark on Hollywood went far beyond the screen. His work wasn't about flashy effects or loud spectacle, it was about humanity. The emotions, conversations, and relationships that stay with you forever. He built his career on storytelling that hit the soul. The Princess Bride remains an all-time classic, a timeless mix of humor, sincerity, and adventure that still captures hearts across generations. Stand By Me continues to be praised as one of the most honest and powerful portrayals of childhood, friendship, loss, and growing up ever made. And of course, When Harry Met Sally redefined the entire idea of what a romantic comedy could be, built on real dialogue, real chemistry, and genuine emotion instead of empty cliches. Critics, fans, and filmmakers agreed. Rob Reiner's legacy wasn't about numbers or fame. It was about consistency, care, and a deep respect for the craft. On set, he was known for being prepared, calm, and trusting of his team. He didn't chase trends or shock value. His work spoke through emotion, honesty, and connection. But Rob wasn't the only one being remembered. Alongside him, tributes poured in for Michelle Singer Reiner, a woman described as the quiet strength behind the family, though she preferred to live outside the public eye. Those who knew her said she played an essential role, a devoted partner, mother, and philanthropist whose compassion and patience anchored everyone around her. Friends describe Rob and Michelle as true partners in every sense. Through decades of love, parenting, and purpose, they moved through life side by side, balancing fame with family, art with heart. They built a life that, to everyone who saw it, looked unshakable. But as the tributes poured in, the contrast became hauntingly clear. The same Hollywood community celebrating Rob's incredible body of work now found itself watching in shock as the legal case surrounding his son continued to unfold. There was no clean line between those two worlds anymore. Grief, legacy, and tragedy had collided into one heartbreaking reality. Public remembrance now existed right alongside private pain. While the entertainment industry filled social media with glowing memories and emotional tributes, the Reiner family was still deep in mourning, navigating the most painful chapter of their lives while facing a legal storm that refused to slow down. Two worlds, celebration and sorrow, now move side by side, rarely crossing, yet impossible to separate. And as the legal proceedings continued, every tribute, every memorial stood as a quiet reminder that behind every headline and court filing were real people. Not just famous names, but parents, partners, and friends whose presence had shaped countless lives. Even after the spotlight fades and the courtroom lights dim, that absence still echoes. Through the film industry, through their community, and through the hearts of everyone who loved them. Rob and Michelle Reiner's story has become one of Hollywood's most heartbreaking and complex sagas, a story of love, loss, and legacy that still leaves the world asking questions. So now, we turn to you. What do you think really happened? Do you believe Nick Reiner is fully responsible for what unfolded? Or could there be more to this story than meets the eye? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear what you think about this shocking and emotional case. And if this story gripped you as much as it did us, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into Hollywood's most jaw-dropping scandals and true-life mysteries. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. And make sure to check out the next video on your screen for even more twists, secrets, and revelations.